The Summer Alike. Today on the Manspace. Welcome to the Manspace podcast. We're your hosts, Doctors Matt Brown and Rob Porter, and clinical therapist Mike Porter. Welcome, Spaceman. There, I should jump right in.
The Summer of Like.
What'd you think I said?
What'd you think he said?
I couldn't tell at first. I was like, are some alike? Is that what are we
The
talking?
Summer of Like. It's from Just Friends. Ryan Reynolds. She says something about, remember this thing? He's like, the Summer of Like.
I'm going to be unpopular. I freaking hate Ryan Reynolds.
What?
Really?
Why?
Yes. Because he's everywhere and he's the same dude everywhere.
Yeah,
every single thing I've seen, I'm like, it's Ryan Reynolds again.
I think that's true of most
the same
actors,
Ryan Reynolds. Though. It is, but I think it's probably just because he's everywhere that it's like, it's just too much.
Have you seen Chaos Theory?
I do love the.
I feel like I have nothing to say to that. Matt, Ryan Reynolds.
Here's the thing that I have liked the most, and it's super like this real obscure sketch he did on Saturday Night Live. I can't remember what the name of the candle is, but it's like getting company to leave your house.
I thought it was Matt Damon.
No, it's Ryan Reynolds. He lights the candle.
Yeah, I've seen that
one. It smells like butt.
Or hot garbage, or I can't remember the other things people say, but
sense. Yeah,
I'm like, all right, there is like a slightly different version of Ryan Reynolds.
Sometimes I've seen him in some things where it feels like he's trying a little too hard to be funny.
Mm-hmm.
But like Just Friends, I think he's hilarious in. And when you watch like that show, Welcome to Wrexham, or you watch his interview with David Letterman, you're like, oh, he's just a really anxious dude, and he seems like a really nice guy. But I don't think I have the issue with he's everywhere thing.
Maybe it's just the algorithms trying to piss me off.
I don't have the reaction to it Matt does, but he does. And that's funny thing. I actually think Dwayne Johnson went through the same thing a couple years ago, where he was everywhere.
Kevin Hart had that problem too.
Yeah, and I think I've heard him talk about it. I think it was maybe it was Seinfeld I heard talk about it, and where they're just like, you got to cash in. If this is when, it's going to run out at some point, so I might as well cash in while I can.
Yeah, I don't blame him at all. I just
Well, that's
have you seen Chaos Theory, Matt? It's I don't know, an independent film ish.
Mm-hmm.
I like Ryan. I like Ryan Reynolds in everything, but it doesn't feel like a very Ryan Reynolds film to me.
You could also, if you want a not Ryan Reynolds film, you could watch a movie called Buried, and the whole movie, the entire movie,
is the one where he's like in the coffin.
It's him in a coffin. You don't see anything else. Oh my gosh, dude, it is brutal. But it's a very good movie. But man, it's rough.
It's just him.
I'm trying to remember if there's any flashbacks or not, but I'm pretty sure it's just him.
There might be some. I think you might hear some exterior things, but I think the bulk of it is just him.
Well, he talks on the phone to people.
Yeah,
but there is no.
And they don't come dig him up.
Well,
they don't know where he is.
The spoiler alert: he doesn't know. He wakes up in there.
That's right.
Yeah,
I won't spoil it.
I think he can do other kinds of acting, but I think he just kind of leans into that persona.
Yeah, and I would too if I was in his shoes. This
is something I've learned.
You've reached your Ryan Reynolds saturation level.
Yes,
this is something
I don't hate
the
man. I'm just saturated.
Like Vince Vaughn, I started to notice Vince Vaughn's just Vince Vaughn in every movie. And then I realized most actors are that person in every movie, unless they're like a method actor, like what's his name?
Daniel Day-Lewis or
Daniel Day-Lewis or Christian Bale is like, even Christian Bale with he still is like, yeah, you're still Christian Bale. Somehow still your characters all have a weird slight lisp.
Although do you guys remember Vice? Did you? I never saw it, but did you guys
No.
see Vice?
I wanted
he
to see it. It's
played
still on my list. When he was Dick Cheney, right?
Dick Cheney, yeah. Like I see images of him, and I'm like, that does not even.
Yeah, but that's partly makeup.
Yeah, but even in his even knowing it's him, I struggled to hear it. Which was if you guys saw, did you guys see the Batman?
Yeah.
No. The Batman?
The Batman, the one with Robert Pattinson.
Oh no. Okay, I thought you were just referring to the Christian Bale.
No,
Christian
Bale.
Bale. Batman.
No. Colin Farrell plays the Penguin in that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
He's making a TV show of it now.
Even once I knew it was him, I still struggled to see it and hear it. Anyway, that's fascinating.
I think it's fascinating just that it's like, oh, so it's not so much that you can act, you can, but mostly we just like you in our movie. So let's just have you in our movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you guys ever watch that Val Kilmer documentary?
Part of it.
Oh no, I wanted to though.
That was kind of his.
I don't like learning.
Big disillusionment was like he was like the youngest person admitted to Juilliard at the time, and was way into acting. And then it was just like he'd have all these fights with the directors because they're like, "Dude, I don't care, just get in there and say the line." He's like, "Well, no, I got to do it like this." Like for Top Gun, he had this whole backstory for Iceman, and like he was like way into it. And when he met his
Tony Scott didn't care.
Yeah, when he met his wife, she's the redheaded lady on Willow. They divorced, but
Willow.
But she was doing like this amazing Broadway, or not Broadway. What's the equivalent of Broadway in England?
West End.
Runway. West End.
So yeah, she's like in some really, well-respected play, and he's shooting Top Secret.
Flaming hog balls, sir. Shooting Top Secret. Dang, I was going to say one more thing about this, and now I forgot what it was. I guess just that everyone should know that Matt does not like Ryan Reynolds. Summer of Life does not apply to Matt.
So who's the better? Well, I mean, to me, I guess this would be an obvious answer for you, Matt. But who's the better Ryan Gosling or Ryan Reynolds?
Oh, that's obvious anyway. Listen.
It's Ryan Reynolds, Mike.
No, it's Ryan Gosling.
I know, dude.
I just finished watching again for the third time The Fall Guy.
It's so good.
Here's the thing that's so good about Ryan Gosling is everything he delivers. Like his jokes are so loose and easy, it doesn't seem like he's trying.
Mm-hmm.
And when he delivers his thoughtful scenes, like these heartfelt lines, it genuinely feels like I think he really feels that. Like he's saying
so
these
sincere,
beautiful things to Emily Blunt. I'm like, Ryan Gosling, I love you so much.
Yeah.
My favorite part is when he's like tearing up to Taylor Swift, and then all of a sudden she's like, I was like, what?
I feel like
my favorite's all the random movie quotes between him and the stunt guy, Winston.
When he has to try to remember
Winston Duke.
I like
where they're just like
during the fight scene when Winston or whatever his name is every time he does some move, he yells out which actor. Daniel Day-Lewis.
Tom Cruise.
Maybe we should just make this episode instead. We'll just make this. Let's talk about the Ryans, and then we'll transition into the Chris's. Which Chris's we like the most? Evans, Hemsworth,
like
Pine, Cornell. We could mix it up.
Ooh. No. His voice is so magical.
Kris Kringle. Throw Santa in there.
Let's go ahead and bring in the holidays.
That feels like if you don't say Kris Kringle's your favorite, it's like saying Jesus isn't your favorite. That's
hey,
like
good news. They did release Harry Connick Jr.'s first Christmas album on vinyl.
How did that spin off of me saying Jesus isn't your favorite?
Well, you just talked faster.
So I think this might be our most random beginning ever.
I will say back to the Chris's. I really did not like Chris Hemsworth a whole lot because he just seemed like just a bonehead basically, and like everything, you know. But when I watched that, what was it called, Limitless thing?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I really like him. I think
E-
of the ones you listed that are living. I think I'd have to say Chris Hemsworth.
Oh,
even
because
the
Matt's favorite is Chris Cornell.
even the did you see the Ghostbusters reboot?
The
What?
girl one.
Oh yeah.
I
See, that's what
freaking
I'm
love
talking
him in
about, dude.
that.
That's somebody that can be another character. One strike against Ryan Reynolds, or three.
Yeah, but
if we're counting.
I thought it was still just it was like, yeah, he's another character, except we're all just no, it's we put Chris Hemsworth in a nerdy outfit.
Yeah.
Nobody. He plays the idiot really well. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't
I
know.
mean, I agree. Fine. So I think we're done.
Plus his singing and his
Spaceman.
dancing.
Ryan Reynolds sucks. That's the message today. Actually, I thought, well, this will just transition us nicely into this topic. The topic, and let's see if I can make this work. Because it was
Launch
the
it.
summer of like, and what happens when you don't like your spouse anymore? Huh? Because we talked about how Matt doesn't like Ryan Reynolds, but maybe he did it first. Then you just reach a point where it's like, I know I've
I don't
seen
think I
your
ever
crap.
really did.
Okay, fine. Matt ruined it.
He went from
You
okay
know-
to yeah, but I know what you mean.
Well, just because I think what's funny is there's so many things we like in spouses at first, and then eventually it's like, I can't stand this about you. Why do you do this? And then you know them so well, it's like, I don't like anything about you,
Mm-hmm.
which is only slightly what we talked about talking about. Right? Mike?
Yes. Is this where I'm supposed to launch it?
Launch it.
Well,
Launch
sorry.
it.
I was I was thinking about
Launch me.
Just for you,
Um,
Mike.
I was,
Wait, what did I just miss? I don't understand what I just saw.
thanks, Matt.
I did my here. I'll do it again.
Oh, was it? Oh, he launched his pen.
Launch it.
Poor people who are listening. This is like
I
listening to a
got
radio
two pens
show.
on the carpet.
You make that sound like it's a big old problem. I got 2 pens on the carpet. Go ahead, Mike.
All right, go, Mike.
Here's where we can make the connection full circle for you, Rob.
I guess I
Because
do a
when
good
you
job.
like each other, it's easy to go out. Right? Which one of the things that we most often tell couples we work with is you need to be dating each other. Not dating other people, dating each other. Just to clarify.
Yeah, got it.
So, but I was, Jenna was talking to some friends, and it
Name
just got
them.
me thinking about this idea of, like, I worked for a principal who was super
Principal.
devoted to her kids. And so as the
Almost
last
too
one
devoted.
hit empty nest stage, was like, Mike, I'm not really sure what's going to happen when our last kid leaves home. And I was like, why? And she goes, I don't think I know my husband very well anymore. And I was like, okay. And I had actually heard, like, I knew someone else who retired and then pretty immediately started substituting almost full time. And I asked why, and she goes, yeah, I can't be around my husband all day. Like, that'll kill me.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, I need to be out of the house at least, 3 to 4 days a week to just be able to, like, tolerate and manage. And it's not that they weren't like, she would have described them as a high conflict couple, or they didn't even have trouble or anything like that. They just hadn't been around each other for so long. That she wasn't, they didn't know what to do with each other when they were around each other. And then a lot of those little annoyances started cropping up. And so her answer was, well, I guess I need to just go be in the classroom some more. Or there's
Horrible solution.
those couples.
I dislike
What?
you so much. I want to go sub a room full of 10-year-olds.
Right?
Jeez, how bad is that marriage?
I just subbed seminary this morning and Monday. And I tell you what, have any desire to do seminary ever. I'm good. Um, no, but and then there's the other couples, right? Where pretty much if they're left alone, a fight's going to happen. So we can't like you want us to go out, but if we're together by ourselves, we're going to fight. So my question for you guys is, one, how often do you actually see these in the couples you work with? Like I am a little bit curious how universal, I guess, this problem is. But then how do you deal with it? Like I know for a lot of couples, like Jenner and I had to actively, when we would go out on dates, especially when stuff with the kids was high stress, to actively say no kid stuff tonight. Because otherwise our entire date night would just be talking about crap going on with the kids. How do you guys, what do you see and what do you do with it?
So this has actually come up multiple times recently for me, but first I want to say audience may not know what this means, but I'm currently 99% uploaded.
Way to go, Rob.
I mean, sometimes you really work at something and it just kind of works out for you. And sometimes the internet heavens just open and Rob uploads fast.
My favorite is going to be at the end when Matt and I are both uploaded and you've dropped back down to like 86%.
Like, why? I mean, I just barely put out this beautiful little gift, and then Mike's like, "Hey, let's see if I can poo-poo on that thing real fast." So
it's like you guys are a couple on a date.
Turns out I can't.
You can't do anything but fight.
That's right. It's kind of funny actually, Mike, because when I think this happens. I've had this happen plenty. I don't actually think, like when you were mentioning, it's like one of the things we tell people most is to date each other. It's like, actually, I don't know that I say that very often.
I tell people that all the time. Maybe it's just me.
I'll mention it like, hey, that's a good idea, but you don't need to pay me a lot of money to have me tell you that, like reading a book. But sometimes I do. I say that's important. Like it is a valuable thing to do. But sometimes I feel like I get a lot of couples who actually, they like each other, but they don't know how to, but they still fight a lot. But if it's like, if you take the stress away, they actually really enjoy each other's company. But then I do get a lot of couples where they've gone so far that they just don't like each other anymore. Or I don't even know if it's they don't like each other. Maybe they do, but they just can't not fight. So we've talked about this before, and I actually think it's it's a hard question to answer, to think how, after I've known you for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, like how do I decide to know you from some different angle that I've never known before? Because I think that's part of what liking somebody is. It's like, let me see the parts of you I've not seen. Like Matt, if you could just learn to love Ryan in a different way, then I think everything could be better.
What you're telling me is the only way I can love him is watching him buried alive in a box.
Yes, that's perfect. There's more to Ryan. Go watch the show Welcome to Wrexham. Dead airspace. So, so here's what we've talked about this on multiple episodes before, but one of the things that I mention often to couples, just yesterday I said to somebody, look, there's certain things you're going to have to do that you might sit in silence with each other. And that's that's like fine. Like when you said, Mike, that you'll say, we're not going to talk about kids tonight. The other day, my wife and I were going out for a walk and we realized that usually it's me talking, and the conversations on these walks tend to go pessimistic or cynical. And so she's like, we're not going to talk about anything cynical today. She's like, we're going to do better. And I said, okay, cool. And then we just kind of walked in silence for a while because it was like all my thoughts were cynical. And actually, this is from our book as a reminder to spacemen, the book that we're reading for maybe 2 weeks from now, or I don't remember what it is, but
no, I think next week is when because isn't next week
Matt's up here? Matt's up here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Fearless Mind.
Next week.
But one of the things they mentioned in there is he mentions something that like 70% or 75% of what we tell ourselves in our heads is negative about ourselves. It's like, oh, that's brutal. And so like I said, sometimes you might sit in silence. That's fine. And then I said, you might try some things like getting out your the Gottman card decks that are like getting to know you questions, or how Jenner, when we'd go on on double dates together, she'd bring up like, what's your best 90s dance, junior high dance, high school dance
Yep.
playlist. And it's just kind of fun, like, or like, what's the weirdest thing you did in high school, or the dumbest thing you did in high school, and hearing things from my wife that I've never heard before. I was like, what? I didn't know you did that. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's like, how did you and I ever date and marry each other? You were not the kind of girl I would have been hanging out with in high school. But the thing I tell people to do is, and this is hard because actually, Mike, I don't know if this answers the question, or maybe shouldn't say answers the question, but solves the problem. I don't think it does. But how do you make somebody want to do this? Because I will tell people to go on a first date, which we've talked about before. I'll say I'm traditional, so the husband has to ask the wife out. Like, would you go on a date with me on Friday night? And you have to plan it, and you have to try to come up with something creative you think she'll like. Or you just do what I did on a first date. I took everybody miniature golfing and to go eat somewhere because I liked miniature golfing and I didn't know what you liked, so we're doing what I like. But then you don't have kids yet. So you're not allowed to talk about your kids. And then at the end of the date, you have to have an awkward door scene. Maybe you'll get a kiss, maybe you won't. And I said, I'm also traditional, so there's no sex on a first date. So that's right out. And then you do your awkward kiss, and then you drive off in your car like you just dropped her off at home, and then you can come back later. So because I want to deliberately force into their heads, like, you have to engage in this in a different way. You have to recognize that you're stuck in a Matt Ryan Reynolds loop and you can't see things right away.
Yeah, it's going to be all episode, Matt.
Every time you say it, I hate him more.
But
that Mint Mobile commercial keeps popping into my head.
But I think it's I don't know that like, I've told people to do that, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, and it's met varying degrees of success. But I think it's a bigger question of like, how do you get somebody to want to like their spouse again when it feels like they just want to feel justified in their anger towards somebody or whatever it is. So I don't know that I answered anything, but there it is.
Yeah, Thanks, your Rob. First question was,
Matt doesn't even remember anymore.
No, it was like, how often do we see it?
I would agree. Do you see this kind of thing?
I do, but I would agree with Rob that it's like, more often than not, what I hear from them is when it's just the two of us and all this, like we're on a trip or something like that, like we're fine. It's when we have to like do all the other stuff
together.
Try to
balance life and work.
Yeah. But I do think that there's, even then, there's probably still a tendency to go toward some of those stressor related things in your conversations when you are alone. I think that, like one thing that I think is helpful is just to remember that vulnerability is not natural. And I think sometimes
it should be uncomfortable.
Yeah, but we assume, because it's a good thing for relationships. It's like, I don't know why we do this, but it's like anything that's good, we're like, oh yeah, that's natural. It's like, no, most of the good things are not natural. And so when you think about somebody who doesn't like their spouse, is irritated with them, or, fights every time they have alone time, that person, and maybe both, have probably had to develop an internal narrative that's protective. Like, you do this thing and it frustrates me. That's uncomfortable for me. So now I'm going to tell myself that, avoid that thing about that person or pick at it. And it's vulnerable to start to dismantle that narrative internally and consider other parts of that person, because you could be right in the middle of liking them and they could do the stupid thing again. And then you're back to frustrated. And like, that's a lot of emotional and mental work. And so I think first and foremost, it's helpful just to normalize it. I've had couples say things pretty, like when they're at this stage, either they're not attracted to each other or frustrated with each other. Like the freedom of just saying it. Like, yeah, you irritate the crap out of me, right? But not like in a way.
Not like I hate you.
Yeah, not like I hate you, or I'm saying this so that you'll change. It's just, that's what I am dealing with. And then you can get to like, well, do you want that to be different? Do you want to feel that way? Because it's a lot. If you don't have that desire to feel different, um, any request to spend time together or any homework to go on a date or whatever comes from a place of like, I'll only do it maybe 25% of the way, and I'm not going to be vulnerable enough for this to really make a difference. So I think peeling back the layers and like normalizing it a lot. Like it is like when you were talking about the retired guy and his wife, it's like, when did we ever come up with the idea that like anybody in life would want to spend their entire day 24 hours a day with anybody else? Like that's just, but it probably creeps in when we talk about relationship expectations, like some of the other episodes we've done. That's probably just one of those romantic expectations, right? Like if given free time, you will just be magnetically drawn to each other and like revel in each other's company. That's just not reality. Like I like spending time with lots of people, but I wouldn't spend 24 hours a day with any of them. Like
except me and Ryan
so
Reynolds.
I think that there just needs to be some room for that to be a bit normal first, and then I think people can get into contact with how they actually feel about it. Because anything that is bothering you about somebody else, when you really calm down and drill down, it's about you, right? And I'm not saying that like as a judgment. It should be easy to dismantle that. It's super, super hard. But if you can't get to the thing that is like irritating you, if your desire is to have a relationship where I'm learning to love in the best way possible, like that's my goal, not be comfortable around somebody, have somebody, anticipate and meet all my needs, but like I'm trying to develop into a person who can love people, especially when they're hard to love. If that's your goal, then I think what I'm saying makes sense. If it's not, then yeah, there might be other things you do, like, well, maybe let's not spend that much time together, and maybe let's just shoot for friendship, right? Maybe let's just shoot for doing something enjoyable together. I've had couples before where they've told me like, look, we're never going to be a happy couple. We just need to be good friends. And so, let's just get to that point. And that's all they wanted to do. That's fine. We got there, and that's where they wanted the relationship to stay. And they were happy with it. So I think it just depends on what you actually want.
That's what I think is, well, actually, that stuff you said first, I think is so overlooked, but valuable. The idea of I can say this thing. It's okay to say this thing out loud. Like sometimes I don't like you. Mm-hmm. It's not saying I don't love you. And I think it's saying like sometimes you can say something and it doesn't mean anything more than what you just said. Sometimes I don't like you. That doesn't mean I'm going anywhere. It doesn't mean I hate you. It doesn't mean I don't love you. Sometimes I don't like you. And I know sometimes you don't like me, but that's fine. Like I love my kids. Sometimes I don't like them. It feels like just go away for now, but I still love them. It doesn't change that. So I think being able to remove the burden of this is some big secret thing, because everyone should always be in love with their spouse every second of every day, is such a massive weight that we think if you have the opposing thought of like, sometimes no, you go ahead and you go off by yourself because I don't want to be around you right now. We think that means something horrible. And just removing that kind of weighty stigma of what does it mean that I think this? It's like nothing. It means nothing. It means you're a normal human. That, like you're saying, man, it's like, no, I don't want to be around somebody all the time. Sometimes like it's cool. You can spend a few minutes away from me. And I think that makes it easier. It relieves the pressure, because I think sometimes if we feel that way, it's like, well, shoot, now, I mean, it almost gives it more power. It's like, well, sometimes I don't like you, which means I don't like you ever, which means I don't even know what to say to you. Because when we start talking and I don't like you, it's like nothing happens. You just don't talk for a few minutes. And then you do have to do what you're talking about, Matt, where it's like there's a deliberate effort necessary to create this really good relationship you want to have, which would require effort and awkwardness and whatever else it is. But Mike, you look like you want to say something.
Well, I was going to say to me, like I do think you're right. There's, with what both of you said, there's a lot to be said for kind of normalizing and recognizing, like, I'm not going to like you all the time, but removing the weight from that statement, that's not an individual thing. Because it's great for me to sit here and say, you know what, I don't like you all the time, but the piece I can't control is how you're going to hear that. Like, it's great that to me, when I say that, I'm not saying I'm going somewhere or I'm not going anywhere, right? Like, no, I'm not leaving. I still love you. But if I've just decided this is the approach I'm going to take, and I haven't, like, there's been no discussion between me and the other person, I can't control how they're going to hear it. And they're probably not going to hear it the way I'm delivering it. They're probably going to hear it as, I don't like you, get away from me. Not right. And so to me, this isn't something that can be done unilaterally. It has to be something that as a couple, you say, look, we need to get to a place where we can, because we do, like, I think you're right, Rob. Like, no, if we're going to sit down and be honest, each member of the couple will have days where they're like, no, I don't like you very much today. This is particularly annoying or whatever, right? But again, the freedom to speak about it openly, that takes work.
Well, it does take work, and I don't know if it has to take huge amounts of work. Like, sometimes I think
sometimes it can be it can just be, hey, we need to be able to be honest about this.
Yeah, and sometimes, we've talked about this before. I worry that mental health, sometimes we're making everything now such big deals. I'm like, well, slow down. That's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Like, to be able to say to somebody, you're still my favorite person, but sometimes I don't like to be around you.
Right.
It's like, and this idea that's like, well, you should never say something that hurts your spouse, which we've talked about before. It's like, well, good luck with that. Then just don't speak.
Yeah.
Like, because you're going to hurt your spouse.
That happened at a conference.
Yeah, it did.
Oh man, it was funny. Leslie Feinauer.
Yeah,
we had like a big alumni dinner or something. It was like one of the first conferences I went to, and that was the first time I met Scott Kettering.
What a delight I'm sure that was.
He was telling all sorts of crazy stories and had the whole table engaged. And then at the end, Leslie went up to him to give him a hug, and she's like, Scott, sometimes I miss you.
Well, that's like with Scott, it's a good example. It's like, I love Scott. But it took me a while to get to this point of understanding him in a different way and being able to have, like, let my relationship with him develop and transition into something else. And it took effort on my part to know, like, yeah, I love Scott. I don't always love being around Scott. He's probably not an avid listener, so it's fine. We can curse him all we want. But I
just
think
turned it off.
He's not an avid listener anymore.
I just think, I think that I guess it's an interesting, maybe that's the missing hole in my head. I don't know. What was that? Body City.
That implies that you should have a hole in your head.
I guess it's the missing hole. There, drill it, Doc. I just like that idea of, like, I think maybe sometimes the first step is like, well, just say this stuff out loud. It's okay. Try it on. Like,
I do think the unilateral piece, though, like I think for a lot of people, that's a conversation that needs to be facilitated. And
yeah,
to your point, Mike, when it comes out like kind of energized or aggressive,
I don't like you very much.
Yeah, that right there speaks to the fact that I'm saying something that can't be said. So I've got to, like, launch it, right? And it's got to come out. Like, I just got to get it out. One exercise, not specifically with this, but that I have couples do pretty frequently, is like, I tell them, like, if you take longer than 30 seconds to do this, you're doing it wrong. But like at the end of the night or whenever makes sense, just sit down and say, here's something you did that, like, irritated me, frustrated me, hurt me today. And the only thing, you don't get to go into details about it. You just say, I felt this towards you today. And then your partner can only say, thanks for sharing. And then your partner says the same thing. And it's like, my intention with it is I'm trying to trying to neutralize that conversation. If you can't talk about those things with each other, if you can't say, I don't want to spend time right now, right? Or I'm feeling frustrated or whatever, then like all this energy goes into forcing something that's like attempting to cover all that up. And then we just get versions of each other that, either never come together, or when we do, it's like super tenuous and it's going to explode at any point, or we're just having a really surface level conversation. But it's, yeah, I think we're keenly aware of our partners' like insecurities and raw spots. And then when we have feelings, that would aggravate that, we don't really know what to do with it. Then like when you feel something about somebody and you're telling yourself that and maybe telling other people about it, like it just grows and grows and grows. And then it's really awkward to see that person again. And that's why I like the East Coast, man. People just say it.
It is such a... Go ahead, Mike.
I do think it's problematic if you're talking about something like if Jenner is doing something that bothers me and I'm talking to someone else about it and I'm not talking to Jenner, that feels like a problem to me.
Yeah.
Like of all the people I should be able to talk to about it, it should be her. And so if you find yourself avoiding certain topics with your spouse, like you got to ask why.
Yeah.
Which just for the sake of maybe challenging things I've said in the past too about like, cause I think, yeah, I agree with you. And also I want to challenge that thought in my own head of like, I think within reason, like with boundaries of like, be respectful about what you would talk about with somebody else.
Yeah.
Don't share all your spouse's dirty secrets and don't make your spouse out. Don't put them in a bad light. But I think sometimes there is advantage or benefit, I should say, to like sometimes talking through something with somebody else to figure out how do I go about this? Because you're not always going to be in therapy. So how do I, like, it's this, if you can go and have a conversation without saying my wife is being the worst and she's doing this, this, and this, but instead of saying, we keep having this thing, we keep getting stuck and I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing. Like, and how do I bring this up in a way that would be meaningful with my wife so it doesn't blow up in my face? Sometimes I think an outside input can be beneficial. No, you're right. I think I agree that if it's always somebody else, I think that's a problem, but
yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it's funny to me because as you were kind of describing the two versions of those conversations, the first version is what went through my head when Matt was saying, if you're talking to someone else, it was that like, oh my gosh, they're the worst. They're driving me nuts.
Right.
Your version of the conversation, I think, no, that is an extremely productive conversation to have.
Right. And that's, I think,
and
I don't
not
wanna...
where my mind went when Matt talked about talking with your problems to someone else, because I don't think stereotypically most people probably aren't having the second conversation. Well, they might get there, but they're starting with the first one.
I don't even know if they know if they get there. I think we sometimes black or white things. It's like, well, you don't talk to anybody else because when you do, you're just smack talking. I think not necessarily. Sometimes, like, for example, we've talked about doing, groups with men. It's like, well, if you went to a group with men to say, hey, I got to talk through this with you guys. I need to know. And admittedly, that's a different kind of setting because it is like, Matt, you and I have talked about, well, I think, what did I name it? Lone Wolves? That's not what I named it. Damon named it that or something. The Wolf Pack.
Oh,
I was asking a question to Matt and a couple other MFT professors of like, hey, what do you guys do in this situation? And I was calling it the think tank or something like that, or I don't know what, brain trust. That's what I called it. But then one of them was like, I like the wolf pack. We're like a bunch of lone wolves or something, whatever it was. But that doesn't work. Wolf pack, lone wolves. But just being able to have a place where it's like, let me run some of these things past you guys with people you trust. Like if there's somebody you're going to go talk to, to say, hey, I don't know if I like my wife a ton lately. And it's like, yeah, dude, I can't stand your wife. It's like, you're not the guy I'm going to talk to. But if it's somebody else to say, yeah, dude, but you're like mean to her, or, like you tease too much. And when you do, you tend to put your wife down. And so then she gets defensive. So maybe if you'd stop teasing your wife so much, you might like her a little more, or, whatever. Like, so it's
Right.
just kind
Some
of saying,
version
no,
of that conversation.
yeah, like I think it can be valuable to say, well, it's okay to try to talk through this stuff with somebody else, knowing that your job is to be the person who protects the one that isn't there. If I'm talking about
Mm-hmm.
my wife, I protect my wife. I'm not going to throw her under the bus. I'm trying to figure out what I would need to change so that I can go about this differently, so that I can then have the desire to go engage with my wife and say, let's figure each other out in a different way. And I still think there's a lot of value in asking dumb get to know you questions that you think you already know, because you probably don't.
Yeah. Which I do think is something important that both of you have pointed out in one way or the other, is that ultimately, as you're working through these things, it's looking back at me, right? If my wife is doing something that I suddenly find really annoying, what's going on with me that I find it suddenly really annoying? Because chances are she's been doing it for years. Why is it annoying now? What's changed for me?
Right.
Now, it might be that something has changed for her, right? It might be a new behavior that she's picked up. But again, with both of these things, right? Like Robin, in your example, it's here's this thing. How do I, not how do I get her to change? How do I?
Sorry.
It's all right. But yeah, how do I interact differently with it? How do I make it something different than it is?
I think there's something here too that you just said something. I think there's maybe sometimes a difference between I don't like my wife and I'm annoyed at my wife.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, yeah, we haven't spent a lot of time together. We don't know each other very well. And then I think it's like, well, yeah, go on dates and be okay with the fact it's like, yeah, we've grown a little distant. That's fine. We need to kind of figure out how to spend more time together. And even what's the right balance for us, like I'm retiring. And so how are we going to spend this time together? The annoyance thing I think is different. It's like, if it's like they've always done this, why am I suddenly getting annoyed? That is an internal thing to say, okay, why is this bothering me so much? Is there something that I'm not addressing with them that I should be addressing? Or is my stress level way too high? Or, because often, honestly, if you're building annoyance against your spouse, there's often something that hurt you or bothered you, but you didn't say something, or you tried to and it didn't go over well. And so you just stopped and it's not being addressed. So honestly, I can't tell you how many men it's like, oh, I was super annoyed at her. And then what happened is like, well, we had sex last night, so things are cool. And it's like, oh, okay. So really you were saying you were feeling a little sexually frustrated and maybe you should have brought that up sooner or whatever it is. It's like, yeah, okay. But instead you're like, you made your wife out to be a horrible person. I don't even like her. It's like, yes, you do, but you didn't bring this thing up. So there's a difference between like, we've kind of drifted and how do we re-engage, and like, I'm annoyed at you. And that's like, if you're saying when we go out on dates, we're always fighting with each other. It's like, then you guys need to go figure some things out about how you just talk in general. It may not be that you don't like each other anymore. It's just that you guys got stuff you got to figure out that's not coming up. And scene.
Well, and I'll throw this out too. Sometimes I think it does lead to the end of the relationship for reasons that make sense to people too, right? Because
sure,
I think if you're if your deeply held internal value is I'm somebody who like really believes in and is struggling with loving somebody as they are, then you're not going to feel right telling yourself, I fell out of love with this person and it's over and I'm leaving, right? Because you'll constantly just have that like nagging, did I do as much as I could there? But if you're a person who really struggles to reach for things that are really important for you, and what's holding you in the relationship is kind of like this, guilt around maybe things that you have allowed yourself to be burdened by throughout your life. And this is just one more example of it. and you stay, that part of you that knows like you can reach for things that are more meaningful and important for you is going to nag at you. So I think it's hard to get down to that like core value and the core struggle that you're having. Because I think it is, I don't want to say it's super common. I don't know how common it is, but I think like I've talked to many, many people, right? And you guys have too, that get to a point of saying, not only do I not like my partner, but I'm not in love with them anymore. I love them as a person, right? But and I think it's tricky because if you just take the surface conversation and run with that, you're running like a 50-50 shot of being in line with yourself or not, unless you really know what that deeper held value is for you. And some of the things we're talking about right now are, I guess, would imply that the person holds a deeper internal value of becoming the best version of themselves and learning to love people as they are and kind of seeing good in people and creating good in a relationship. But there's also the other crowd of people that would say like, this has kind of been my whole life, right? Like I have continued to fail at reaching for the things that ultimately feel right to me. And I keep finding myself kind of stuck in patterns with people and situations that go nowhere. And so it's tricky.
I mean, that just makes me think too that what you're saying earlier, like if this is the kind of person I want to be, when you're saying if I, getting stuck in these patterns, sometimes it's like, well, is this a me thing or is this a them thing? And what things in me can I change? It's like if this is the pattern I'm in, why am I closing off this way? Why am I doing this way? Why did I shut down or whatever? Like I think it's valuable to ask what kind of person do I want to be, and is what I'm experiencing a you thing or is it a me thing? And then there is still like what you're saying, man. I think it is valid to say there are times where some of what I think people feel and experience and go through in their relationships, it's like, yeah, it's not our job as therapists to say, hey, you should stay together no matter what. I think there are times when it's like, I get when people say, I think I've reached the end of this. And I think I understand sometimes when you reach the end of that and it feels like, I feel like I've tried to do everything I can think of. I've tried to do this, and this, and I can't seem to make these things come back. I think I get that. Like none of this, I don't think anything we ever say is ever intended to be like, no matter what, like, I mean, I do think most of what we're saying is, I think most of us would agree that a lot of people I meet in my office, it's like, you guys could do a lot more than you're doing, like you may not know what those things are. And clearly you're here because you want to do those things. But anyway, now I'm rambling.
Are you rambling at 99%?
Yeah, still 99%. This is so exciting. Champ. So then,
best recording day ever.
I think we've just taught people how to like their spouses again. You're welcome, everybody. And this is a momentous occasion for all our listeners to know that I'm at 99% uploaded. Yeah. And then I guess, so we're saying next week, although we'll have to talk about this because I thought there was a time we decided next week's recordings would be different, but we'll talk about that later. Soon, in one of these upcoming episodes, you'll be hearing about our book. So go pick it up and read it. The Fearless Mind by Craig Manning.
It's a really short book.
Craig T. Nelson. Coach. This guy is a coach.
Yeah, he's a coach.
I didn't realize he was at BYU. Anyway, we'll be covering that soon, so come back and catch us next time on the Manspace. Today's episode is brought to you by Ryan Reynolds and his many companies, including Wrexham AFC, Mint Mobile, Maximum Effort Channel, Alpine F1, Aviation American Gin, Wealth Simple, and Nouvet.